Kit looked me in the eye and said, "Take off my dress."
What?
So I did. And then she said, "Take off my bra." So I did. And then she said, "Take off my panties." So I did. And then she said,
Why were you wearing this?
"Stop wearing my clothes, you're stretching them out." So coroner goes back to Middle English, and it's from the same root word as the crown, and their job was to safeguard the crown's valuables when somebody died in the kingdom. And Kit got the idea, I think, to pursue the job of deputy coroner when we were on a bad car crash. Actually, it was a motorcycle crash. And the retired chief, deputy chief of the Colorado State Patrol was killed. And one of our medics literally took off his medic hat, put on his coroner hat, and switched his job. And Kit said, "I want to do that." And I was not at all surprised, and it turns out, I think she was a better coroner than the actual coroner was. And she was a mere deputy. But no, they all do the same thing pretty much. So, I am pleased to introduce my wife, Kit Cassingham.
I like that. In her own dress.
So, Randy told part of the story of how I got interested. Is that too hot?
A little bit.
Too loud? That's fine.
Or maybe just turn it.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Right in my pocket. As I watched Steve, our paramedic who had gone from paramedic to coroner, work, I found myself intrigued with the whole process. The sheriff, was he a deputy? He was, am I popping? He was wearing his leathers, and that held all of his bones and stuff in place. And I actually, for the first time ever, touched a dead person by helping Steve put him in a body bag. And it was fascinating to me. I know it's a really weird fascination.
Yes.
But you guys know me. I do weird things. So I went to the coroner and said, when Steve retired, the coroner was looking for somebody to replace him. And I'm going, me. And she goes, "No, I want Glenn." And Glenn says, "I already got 2 full-time jobs. I don't need another one." And I go, me. And she kept pointing to other people. And even when my chief paramedic said, "Kit would be really good at this," the coroner kept shying away, but finally, because she needed assistance, she helped. So that is kind of what got me intrigued. Now, I did have an edge over other people doing the coroner work, because Randy, being in charge of emergency communications in the county, we had all kinds of radios and scanners and stuff that 24/7. So I heard the accidents that I knew would turn into a death, or I heard the calls saying somebody forgot to wake up this morning. So I was out the door before the coroner would have been called. Now, I got reprimanded for jumping the call, but that's okay. I was there and doing what I needed to do. So anyway, that kind of was the beginning of how I got interested. Now, in Colorado, and it's different in every state and probably every country, but in Colorado, as Randy said, my job was to protect the belongings of the deceased. I actually was above the sheriff at the scene. It was my scene. I got to control it and let people in, tell people what they could and couldn't do. So I did all of that and attended the autopsy. What? I'll get there. It's in my talk. So I'll get there. Trust me. So people would say, what do you like about this? I said, because what I'm liking is it combines my science interests and my hospitality interests. I loved going to autopsies. I know, it's weird, but I loved it because we all know that we've got body parts, and I got to see how they did or didn't fit together. The hospitality side was I would go to the family and console them, tell them what happened, what I saw. So I was taking care of them. And so my very first autopsy was because, or came about because our phlebotomist who worked in the pathology lab knew that there was a case from the other county, and she got that coroner to let me, or the pathologist to let me sit in on that call, or the autopsy. And the story was a woman who had disappeared, and they did find her. She was naked in the back of her car. It was in the winter. She had dirt and grime embedded in her skin and under her nails. And she froze to death. She died, and we've talked about this. Where did we talk about this? John Frem talked about. Where are you, John Frem? There you are, right there. Where it's a paradoxical undressing. They get so cold, their body goes, oh no, we're hot. So they take their clothes off, and it doesn't help, by the way. So I got to watch the doctor do his thing with her. And the very next day was my official call in my county. And it was a story of a young woman who hadn't been feeling well for a couple of days, invited her boyfriend over for breakfast, and she told him she was going to take a shower and maybe go back to bed. Well, he didn't hear from her for a while, and so he came over, and she was in her robe with her hair wet, lying across the foot of the bed, dead. And so the sheriff deputy, who also played coroner deputy, taught me how to start doing scene management, taking pictures, and he did this, but go look in the refrigerator, the freezer, the cabinets, look around, see if there are any clues as to what might have killed this person, contributed to their death. Collect their meds, anything that will give you a clue. So then I would make a list of the meds. I would figure out who the doctor was from the prescription bottles, and then call the doctor and say, does it surprise you that this person's dead? And they will give me some background on that. And we called the mortician, we call the ambulance is usually called because that's the way our county worked. So I go to the autopsy. Ruth Ann, close your ears. Okay. So I'm standing at the head and off to the side, so I'm not in the pathologist way. And he opens her up, and a yellow thing popped out of her body, and I'm going, oh, livers aren't supposed to be that color. The short story is, she died from fatty liver disease. Now, I happened to have been reading the book Wheat Belly at the time, and I had just read about how wheat can contribute to fatty liver. She had a genetic condition that caused that. When you eat a lot of things like ramen, a lot of sodas, or drink a lot, and she had a reputation for drinking. She was a cocktail waitress in town. All of that can contribute to the fatty liver. But she was mid-20s, early 20s. The genetic component is what killed her. Her dad immediately went and her brothers too, got tested. Dad had the fatty liver gene, and I don't think the brother did. So that was my very first case. And so that's when I go, wow, look at how bodies are so different. So that then brought in the part that Randy was trying to get me to talk about, the mystery behind the death. Every death is a mystery. It's not, all right, if there's a gunshot to the body, all right, that's pretty clear. But if there are no wounds, what killed them? And why was this woman, the first one, Alex naked in the back of her car in winter morning when they found her. They figured out that she had gotten lost and tried to turn around and her car got stuck in the mud. In Colorado, springs can be snowy and icy, and then mushy and soft, and then snowy and icy. She got stuck during the muddy part. But every call is a fascinating mystery. So I just gave you a slight hint, or a little bit with that first story. My very favorite call was a motorcyclist off the road. And we found out that he'd gone off the road because a family driving into Ouray from the south, the kids go, "Mom, stop! We just saw lights go off the road." And then they saw another motorcyclist drive up to the edge, look over, and keep going. And they're going, the dad was a motorcyclist, and he said, "That's not how motorcyclists behave. Even if you didn't know who went over, you would stop and try and do something, or turn around and go back into town where there was cell service." So the family continued into town and told the story. So search and rescue came out because they knew they'd have to go looking for the bike and everything. The sheriff and the EMTs. We had just had dinner in town, and we're on our way home when we got the call. So Randy turned around and left me at the gas station where the coroner came and picked me up, and off we went. To get this guy out of the canyon, because they were going over Red Mountain Pass, the $1 Million Highway, which has the reputation of being the most dangerous road or the scariest road in the whole country. I don't know why people don't like driving on mountain roads that don't have guardrails. If you drive between the lines, you'll be fine, right? Well, so what we figured out is this guy he'd had a beer or two. ETOH is often involved, but when you're driving, don't look at the signs telling you the road's turning, because you get distracted by the sign and you're not paying attention to the lines that you're supposed to drive between. And this guy drove straight and the road turned left, or bent left. He died from any one of 5 mortal injuries. So when he went off the road, his bike ran into a big rock cliff. And so he fell, he tore his femoral artery, I forget all the different things, but when he landed at the bottom of the canyon, his motorcycle landed on top of it. It's like, damn, that's rude. That's really rude. It took the mountain rescue a little while to get all rigged up and get him and his bike pulled up. And they brought him usually bodies are taken straight to the morgue. In this case, search and rescue, mountain rescue didn't want to do that. So they brought him to the fire station, and that's where we started investigating a little bit. He had his driver's license. That was our only clue as to who he was. And he didn't live in the area. Who was he with? Why was he alone? Who was the lone motorcycle guy? Where's this guy staying? So we don't know where his car is. We know he was from Yuma, Arizona. He did not ride his motorcycle from Yuma to Ouray County because it's too long a drive. I mean, you could do it, but it didn't fit. So the sheriff deputies went around the next day to every lodging facility, camping and otherwise, in the county. And I think they touched on some surrounding communities too. And they found one place that had, they said, well, there were a couple of guys in here wanting a place for tomorrow night, but we didn't have any, so they left. Oh no, they didn't leave. They left, but one of them came back this morning and canceled their reservation for tonight, or tomorrow, whenever it was. But they didn't know anything about these guys. Well, then some residents of the county came back into town, and they went straight to the sheriff. They said, we were camping there at Amphitheater all weekend, or wherever it was, it doesn't matter. and there's a camp set up. There's a car there. There's a trailer for motorcycles. But nobody ever showed up. So the sheriff went and found the car, got the phone out of the car, and ran the plates and got more details. Because I had a driver's license, I called my sister-in-law and a friend who do genealogy work, and I said, help me track down this guy's family. Now that doesn't fit in, most genealogy stuff doesn't tell you who's alive still, but my one friend said, okay, the sister lives over here and parents are dead. He seems to have a track record, a prison record. So I called the prison in Yuma and said, I'm the coroner here in Ouray County. Do you have any records you could share with me for this guy? Nope, can't do it. No, I don't blame him. I wouldn't know if I would trust some woman's voice saying that she was a coroner. But that's okay. It confirmed that indeed he lived in town. And little bit by little bit, we gathered information. When the state patrolman who was in charge of the road accident and I were talking, I went through the phone and I figured out that the deceased was texting with two other guys. And they were arranging when they'd have dinner, where they'd meet, and all this stuff. And I started going, okay, there's the sister's name. Okay, I'm getting a good picture of this. And we talked about the lone motorcyclist who reported the light, or who stopped to look. And I said, that's his buddy, and his buddy's name is. And so they went to chat with him, and the guy declared he didn't know anything. I said, he's lying to you. I just love it how I talk to my superiors like that. And he says, no, I believe him. I said, I don't. Well, Kit, why would he lie about that? I said, I don't know. His job relies on him not drinking and driving. I don't know. We did enough research. I called the sister and told her what happened. She goes, I knew something was wrong because he wasn't returning my text. We got all kinds of things figured out. And I loved the puzzling. And my glory out of this is that indeed the motorcyclist was the guy he'd been traveling with. And the reason he didn't report it is because he was a helicopter pilot in the Mideast, and his job he would have lost his job if they'd known he had been involved in something like that. So to protect his job, now the guy was dead. It's nothing, but there's a respect that was missing, and that baffled me. So piecing all this stuff together thrilled me. Now, one thing I learned is the more violent a death, the sooner the body starts decomposing. Remember, it was kind of a cold winter night, or it doesn't matter. But it was in the mountains, so it was cold. By the time they got his body up and into the fire barn, he was stinky. And I thought, oh my goodness, whoever has to take him to the hospital is going to have an uncomfortable ride. And the mortician the next day also had unfun. But yes, he was really beat up with this particular accident. I mean, there's a lot of trauma. So that would, because that had the science, care, and mystery, that is my favorite story. And it's been long enough ago, I know I've left out some interesting details, but that's where it all comes together for me. Lino has turned me on to some coroner books that are novels, and I was just, as I'm reading this one today, I'm going, this coroner dealt with a lot of violence, crime, and we didn't have violence. I mean, suicides were violent, cars driving off edges were violent, but it wasn't person against person sort of crime. I think I investigated 3 suicides, 2 gunshots and 1 hanging. And I want to tell you about the 2. There were 357s that they used on themselves, and they're very interesting, contrasting stories. The first one was a neighbor. We lived on a mesa that was about 12 miles in each direction, and we lived right in the middle of it. And anybody who lived on the mesa was our neighbor, our next door neighbor. That's just how the community built itself around there. We had put our EMT hats on because this woman's husband said she disappeared. I don't know where she is. I'm worried. She had chronic pain, and I think the sheriff figured out that she had purchased a gun a few days before, maybe a week before, and so we figured we were looking for a body. And interestingly, Randy had an instinct to head over there into those shrubs, and the sheriff said, "No, you can't go there because the scent dog will be thrown off by your scent." I go, "Well, I don't think so." They found her where Randy was headed. But it took a couple of days for them to find her. They thought, well, maybe she went to throw herself off the cliff because they were right at the edge of the escarpment of the mesa. Maybe this, maybe that. And they had all kinds of things. But she had put herself in the shrubs and swallowed a bullet. It was better to do that outside than inside. A lot less mess to clean up, a lot less mess to have to look at. But she had chronic pain. She was in her 60s. It wasn't going to get better. And I thought, your suicide makes sense to me. I helped take care of the husband and got people checking on him on a regular basis. The other one was a 21-year-old kid. That one did not make sense to me. He had wanted to be in the Navy all of his life. And the Navy kicked him out because his kidneys were retroperitoneal, which means they were outside the body sac. And I don't know why that would make any difference to the Navy, but it did. His boyfriend had taken advantage of him, letting him buy stuff for him, and then broke up with him, maybe taking some possessions, and he and his dad had a fight. So he went to his favorite place on the mesa, and he swallowed a bullet. That one punctured the roof of his truck and splattered stuff everywhere, and it was icky messy. His death made no sense to me. I wanted to say, kiddo, these are all temporary issues. Get a grip on it and find another passion. Find another boyfriend and make up with your dad. But he never had that opportunity. So that was a sad one. That was really sad. It was hard to take care of his parents. In fact, the coroner did more of that than I did in this particular case. We had, how do I start this? There was a cancer patient who had come to Colorado to get some treatments at a nearby physician. Actually, it was an hour away, but and he was staying at his friend's house. And I think the Broncos were playing football, and it was a football day. And the owner of the house heard a thump upstairs, but the game was really good, and so he stayed engrossed in the game. And when the game was over, good stopping place, he went upstairs and he found his friend dead on the floor. So now he wasn't dead. Oh no, the neighbor, the man had started CPR. So as EMTs, we moved in, and once CPR starts, you can't finish it until the head doctor gives you permission. So we go, all right, well, let's practice our CPR on this dead guy. And so we did that for a long time before one of our paramedics came up, got permission from the doctor to stop. And the hard part of that one is he had a DNR, a do not resuscitate, but we couldn't find it. We didn't know where it was. So the lesson for all of you, if you want a DNR, have it readily available everywhere you go. Have it in your wallet. Have it visible in your house. Randy said his mother lived in a place where they didn't like DNRs, so we had her post hers above her bed. I gave her a Vial for Life, which was a vitamin bottle or medicine bottle that I put, filled out all the medicines and all of her health history, rolled it up, put it inside, and it goes in the refrigerator. And I think I put a magnetic patch on the refrigerator so EMTs would be aware of where to look for it. But this guy was traveling, he didn't have it with him, or we just didn't know where it was. So that was kind of hard. And I don't think I played coroner on that one. But it still fits into calls I've done that I find to be very interesting. Okay, then we had a fellow who worked for Road and Bridge. He was one of the guys who liked to spread sand and dust or dirt and plow, and he just did all kinds of stuff with big trucks. He hadn't been feeling real good, but the doctor said, you'll be fine. And he was up on the bumper of one of the big trucks at the barn, and he fell down. Fell off the truck and fell down, dead. So I went with the coroner to his house, and as soon as we opened the door, the wife just burst out crying and screaming because she knew Colleen, and she knew if Colleen's at her door, not good news. Went to the autopsy, and the guy had a cardiac tamponade. Your heart is inside a sac, and if it fills with fluids, it keeps your heart from doing the pumping, which keeps you alive. And that's what killed this guy. Watching her reaction was hard. I was glad Colleen was there for that one. Maybe it wouldn't have been so hard if I had been the only one at the door, because the woman, we could have been inside before she had to sit down and collapse. But one New Year's Eve, Randy and I had gone to Ouray to watch the fireworks and have dinner and toast in the new year, though we didn't stay for all the celebration, if I remember correctly. And we met with his assistant in the Mexican bar, and we stood at the bar talking to her, and the guy never offered us a drink, but that's okay. We were about to ready to hit the road. But we talked with the bartender a lot. We talked with Claire, and we had a nice evening, and we went home. And then I came most of the way back to Ouray about 1 in the morning because a guy had run off the road into a tree, and he'd gone through the windshield. The ambulance actually coming back from some other medical call that they found him. And so they had been doing CPR on him, not knowing who he was. He was a well-known, well-loved man in town. And when they figured it out, they fell apart.
It was the bartender.
And it was the bartender. That one was interesting in that when we followed his tracks, he had been weaving down the road and always came back to the highway. It was a road that had a lot of pullouts and wide spots, and he took advantage of those not being on the road. And when he hit this really old tree, it stopped him too suddenly, and that's when he went through the windshield. And the sheriff said if he had just missed the tree and gone into the river, he probably would have been okay. He would not stay at his mother's house. He and his mother, when he got off work, they were out toasting with a bottle of champagne. They drank the whole bottle themselves, and who knows what else they'd had. And she tried to get him to stay. He said, no, I've got to get home and take care of my dog. My dog wants to get outside. Bad decision. So the mother's beating herself up for having allowed him to leave. And it just, his brother was upset. I mean, that was a real tough one also to deal with. And, you know, there's nothing you can do when your body's been lacerated with a lot of windshield glass. Lesson is, if you're going to drink, don't drive. Oh, we don't have to worry about that here, do we? Okay. All right, another suicide that I got to do. There was a man, he was a Korean who had moved to Denmark, joined the Danish army, and had some accident or something where he was hurt severely. He kept pain patches on his body at all times. He had decided to commit suicide in Colorado because it was the most beautiful place in the world, as far as he was concerned. He'd scoped out where he was going to go, but he and his buddies were in Las Vegas, and they'd been partying and just living it up. Then he rented a Cadillac Escalade to drive around. He drove from Vegas to Ouray County, and he drove off the road 400 feet down. A snowy day. A white Escalade disappears in the snow when it's 400 feet away. The sheriff deputies had driven up and down the road. Now, they didn't know where he was initially. How did we figure out? Well, I don't know how we knew he was in a car. Oh, I do know. His brother had talked to him the night before, and he had said, "I'm going to commit suicide, and here's what I've got. Here's the car in a car, and I'll be in Ouray County." And the brother called the sheriff and said, "Go looking for this guy." Well, so we called Hertz. I guess Randy knows more details than I do. Thank you. Called Hertz and said, "Tell us where this guy might be." They said, "Nope, can't do. His 2 weeks aren't up, and it's his privacy. You just go away." He said, "I'm the sheriff. Go away." So they called OnStar, which Hertz puts in their cars. OnStar said, "Well, we last pinged him at such and such a place, location." So the sheriff deputies continued their back and forth, and finally they go, "Oh, maybe those are tires I see sticking up out of the snow." Again, Mountain Rescue had to pull the car up. Well, they don't pull the car up, but they went down and they got him. He survived the crash. Elements killed him, and he froze to death. He had a knife in his hand. We weren't sure what that was for. Was that so he could cut the seatbelt if he didn't die? Was it to kill himself? We didn't know, but he survived the crash. So if you want to commit suicide, don't rent an Escalade, because you'll survive. And when the brother was really broken up, but this guy had a lot of the pain patches in his gear. All the airbag curtains went off, and things kind of rearranged themselves inside the car. It was rough to see how badly he had felt that he would need to do this. So it was interesting, and I think that's all the stories I need to entertain you with. So, what questions do you have? What answers do you have?
My experience has been that people that go into hospice, you'll frequently see the obituary say they died peacefully in their sleep, which was the unwritten way of saying they got a lethal dose of drugs and passed away peacefully. Would a coroner get involved in something like that?
Are you asking, will they get involved in cancer hospice cases or in helping people overdose?
Well, hospice cases and, the legality or whatever is associated with.
He's asking if hospice patients are attended to by the coroner,
Right.
or EMS. No, once you're put into hospice, they do everything. They are the ones who give you your meds and check on you, and they're the ones who call the mortician to take you away. They send a report to the coroner but they don't. We don't do. That's an understood death. So no, we don't. Now you did raise an interesting subject, though. How do we know when to do an autopsy? If it's an unexpected death, the person seemed healthy. Nobody witnessed them fall or whatever, we do an autopsy to find out. But if you've been sick, your doctor says, well, their illness made sense that they would die, we don't do an autopsy. If it's work related. We had a friend, probably one of the most wonderful people I've ever known, ice climber. He was so good at rigging and roping stuff. He taught the Canadian Mounties how to do rigging and roping, rope rescue stuff. They would come to Colorado to study with him. And one day he was out teaching 2 clients how to ice climb. And the slab of ice he was on gave way. And he slid, I don't know, to his death. I don't know how far it was. Can you?
Far.
Several hundred feet. Can you imagine being the students who are on the slab that didn't give, going, but teach, we're not done. How do we get down? So he had to have an autopsy because it was work related. And I thought of another case. Well, if it comes back, I'll tell you. The hanging, of the suicide, the by hanging. We never figured out what this woman's problem was, but she was very, very unhappy. She tied a scarf or a rope or something around a doorknob, and she leaned on the floor and let her body weight drop onto the belt. And so she hung herself on the floor. It was crazy. Now, when I went to a coroner convention, they did a whole session on suicide by hanging. And there are some people who recorded their suicides. I guess so their friends and family would know that they were really dead and serious, and it was crazy. But I watched different people. I saw the contortions the bodies went through as the oxygen leaves them. And I just was thinking, this woman could have saved herself if she just sat up. So she clearly didn't want to. She had an autopsy. But, all right, any other questions? Yes?
How did you determine that person who was found dead in the vehicle, that the death was actually from the elements?
So, Beverly's asking, how did we know that she died from my very first case was not my first autopsy. How did we know that it was the elements? Is that the one, or the guy off of the edge?
No.
The guy off the edge.
In the Escalade? Because he had some wounds and they kept bleeding, so that meant he was alive. So she asked, how do we know the Escalade guy died from elements? Was that clear enough for you, Beverly? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes, go ahead, Mike.
Do I have this right that in some locales the coroner is elected?
He's asking, are coroners elected? In Colorado, they are. I don't know too many other locations. I suspect they may all be elected. And some coroners are physicians, and they do the pathology, do the autopsy, or they do the crime investigation along with law enforcement. So in Colorado, we have a nice separation of duties, but ours was elected, which was the advantage of being the deputy. I got appointed, but I had to fight so hard with that woman. It's like, lady, come on, here's somebody saying me. I was glad not to have to run later, but anyway. All right, any other hands up? Oh, Cindy, I'll come to you second, and I'll do you, Sharon.
So the woman you found, who was found in her car, right? She froze to death also?
She's asking the woman who was found in the back of her car.
In the back of her car.
Yes, she froze to death.
Okay, and so she was just trying to get around?
No, so she's not understanding, why would somebody be in the back of their car and freeze to death? John talked about it in his cold session. You weren't on the ship then, so there's paradoxical undressing, and the body gets confused. Your brain slows down when it gets really cold, and as your body temperature drops, your brain gets real confused. And then after a while, your body, I may be doing a bad job of this, but I'll run with it. You then start feeling hot. So, well, if I'm hot, I can take my clothes off and cool off, which only aggravates the freezing to death. Is that adequate enough, John? Okay. Cindy.
When Thomas passed, it was at home, and so they drug the coroner out of his bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. Is that normal? And what's it like having to deal with people in the house versus ones outside the house?
Okay.
You know, when you
Cindy related that when her husband died, they drugged the coroner out of his bed at 4 in the morning, and she's wondering what it's like dealing with the deceased while the family's there. Was Thomas was he healthy?
Yes.
So that's why they brought the coroner, because it was a surprise.
No shit.
And you know, Cindy, every family is different on how easy it is to handle the death. The bartender, his family was really rough to deal with. Now, he wasn't there, which helped. How many times did I have the body in the family? There's one in particular where the woman was overweight and never moved. She was not very mobile. And when she died in her lazy boy, you know, the marshal did the thing of call EMS to make sure she was dead, call the coroner, make sure, you know, and then he decided, the marshal decided to go ahead and call the mortician. And about the time the mortician arrived, the family said, no, don't take him away yet, because we want somebody who lives 2 hours away to come see her before she goes. So we all hung around and tried to comfort the kids and deal with the family and twiddle our thumbs while we waited for family to arrive. Every scene's different, Cindy. The road and bridge guy, his wife was a little difficult. Initially, she was kind of hysterical, but then kind of took it in stride. There's one case I did where the guy, I never figured out what he did. He wandered away and was found in a pond. Can you imagine walking around your neighborhood at night and you see a body in the pond? And it was, I think, March, so it was cold. His mother was wacky. This is one case where I think the coroner did a bad job. The mother was one of the cooks at the school, and so we went there. But Colleen was really concerned that she was cooking lunch for the kids, so we couldn't actually go into the kitchen and say, "We found your son." So we're supposed to tell next of kin, and the boyfriend or the stepfather or somebody wasn't next to kin. So the mother figured out that we were there and that her son had been found. She took off. My spidey senses said she went to hide some evidence that said she might have known what he was doing or where he was. But I was just the deputy coroner and not much I could do. She was difficult. And we brought in Colorado Bureau of Investigation on that one. So they took care of her. How would I have handled it with you? Were you hysterical? So, you know, what you present is what I deal with. I let you talk. I would sit with you and say, tell me some stories. Tell me about Thomas.
Oh, I couldn't have done that.
Well, you would have
That
told
was
me other stories. I would have kept you would have talked out your emotions one way or another. So it's not ridiculous. Or we would have talked about your needlepoint project.
Well, the policeman was there, and he said, "Ma'am, I am sorry. We do have to call the coroner in because this is an unexpected death, and we need to make sure that there was nothing happened." Right. And I said, "Well, if you've been married 5 minutes, you know that's always a possibility. However, last night we went to bed happy.
Cindy was explaining how the policeman had said we have to investigate in case you killed him. I think most of you heard her stories. So, any other questions? Yes, Lisa.
How do you decide when you and the coroner can resolve the death versus the detectives and the crime scene?
Lisa's asking how we break up the investigation. If there looks like there's been a crime, law enforcement does that kind of research. But if it's just a mystery death, the coroner handles it. Now, in my case, all of our law enforcement helped me with taking pictures, checking the neighborhood, doing things. But for the most part, we coroners handled it all. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's whether it's a crime or not. So, is that okay? Okay. Yes. All right.
Here on the ship, if someone died, do they just put them in the fridge and keep them until the next port?
All right. Now you've asked outside my league. I believe that's the case. Lori says, so what if somebody dies on the ship? I think we should throw them overboard, but I'm told that's not allowed. Lena would have to file an environmental report. But I think that there must be a refrigerator that's big enough for a body down in the medical center. So let's hope nobody does that. Yes.
Have you ever had an incident where an autopsy was required and a family fought you because of religious reasons?
Did I have a case where a family fought us for religious reasons against doing the autopsy? No, nothing that I've ever heard about in my jurisdiction or other coroners in Colorado. So good question.
And that happened in my husband's family because his aunt passed away, and according to religion, you don't. But of course they won. The government said you have to because it was an unexplained death.
The bookkeeper, when I was a bed and breakfast innkeeper, our bookkeeper died suddenly, unexpectedly. He was walking across the bank driveway and fell down dead. And his religion wouldn't even let them take the intubation tube out. So they taped it in place, and or the bagging, not the intubation, but the bagging, a little valve that goes in the mouth. So, and then we, I don't know the right terms, I don't remember. His funeral involved sitting there with his body till he lost rigor. But I'm sure it's long before I was an EMT or anything, but I do remember all that, thinking how interesting we die. It's all interesting. So.
David Austin and John Fred.
David Austin. I don't know where you are. Okay. Did I handle a murder? No, we didn't have any murders in our county. It's a sweet little place. Do you recall any murders? No, we didn't have any murders.
There's a TV show, Corners. Is it like that?
I haven't seen it, David. I don't know. Now, the county north of us had murders, but we didn't. So, and who's the other one? Okay. It's nice you can get people to ask your questions for you. All right. Any more questions?
Okay, but to follow up on that then, what if somebody had a pact? Okay, well, if I die, push me overboard, and they do that, what happens?
I don't know. I've only been on the ship 6 months.
Coroner.
I don't think there is a coroner. Do you want me to ask the environmental? The environmental officer will answer this. Hold on. I need a microphone. Well, okay. Well, no, answer it now. Well, it's.
How about the question? What if you have a dead body on board?
What are we going to do with dead bodies on board? Can we throw them overboard?
For breakfast.
to know why you're asking.
Jose? Okay, it's on now. Or it's,
All right. So what was the question? You want to know if we have deaths on board? No. You want to know what we do with them? Is that what the question was?
Yep.
Yeah. We do have a morgue, is what it's called. They don't get dismarked on the next port of call because you were talking about your stories, but we were doing a tour of the Baltic, and then we did Russia, we did Odessa, we did St. Petersburg, we did multiple ports, in 14 ports, 14 days, and none of them would let us disembark a corpse. So it's not necessarily the next port of call. It would depend on, one, if they allow you to disembark a corpse, and then two, if the family wants the body to be disembarked, depending on where you are in the world, because then it's a transfer back home. So we do have a morgue on board. If in any event the morgue is out of service, then they use one of the refrigerators on board. It could happen. You have ice cream, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but it could happen. I'm not being funny because it has happened in Royal Caribbean that there was a problem with the compressor and then they had to use the ice cream freezer. It happens. Being a physician, we had in 1993 the freezer for, well, the mortuary, the refrigeration broke, and we used the refrigerator in the hospital's kitchen to store the bodies after death. So that is a true story, and it happens, but you have to respect the dead. We also had a time when somebody put the body face down, which was affected. They had to have a closed casket because all the blood flowed.
all right.
So anyway, I hope I answered your question.
All right.
The overboard part. Why can't we just toss them overboard?
Because it's against, well, one, it's against the law because you're in international waters.
It's because it's international waters.
Yeah, if you throw a body overboard, that's considered hiding evidence because.
Why don't you turn your microphone on?
Yeah, I just don't.
Too bad.
Can I just come stand next to you and talk? No.
Yeah.
No, you can't throw them overboard for one. Like right now, where we are, we pass the wider Caribbean region. So we can't discharge anything overboard because the wider Caribbean region is a particularly sensitive area. And you cannot discharge food waste, you can't discharge humans, you can't discharge animal carcasses. There's a whole plethora of things you cannot discharge into the ocean. One. Number two, it could be covering murder. So the reason that you would call a coroner is because it's a sporadic or unexpected death, and now you don't have a body. And they can't verify that it wasn't foul play. And because we're in international water, we can call the FBI, blah, blah, blah. The majority of you are Americans, therefore that we have to have the FBI involved. So it's a whole slew of things. But no, you cannot throw people overboard. We do not appreciate
Nice
that.
try, Lynn. So I just want to tie mine up by saying, I think I've shared enough stories to let you see how the science and the caring for people and the mystery really pulled together for this short career I had as a deputy coroner. So thanks for coming to this.